Hello everyone, welcome to the Hyper Voice. My name is Steven Morioka. I am joined by Alex Underhill. Hello Alex.
Hello Steven.
How are you doing? Are you excited about doing this?
I've been waiting to do this for a very long time.
To our listeners out there, what we are actually doing is a Pokemon podcast specifically focused on the video game championships. Shorthand for that is VGC. Now, we're going to be covering a great deal of topics for our first episode. Hopefully, we'll last a while going here. But what we wanted to do first is just introduce ourselves to you. So, both of us are from the Chicago area. I'm from the city. Alex lives out in the suburbs. And basically, Alex, how did you get started in Pokemon? And specifically competitive Pokemon?
Well, I've been playing Pokemon for a very long time since I was a kid. But when I started playing competitively was in 2010. I started playing competitive singles kind of casually, and it wasn't until 2014 that I started to get into VGC and had the urge to attend live events.
Great. So starting in 2014 means you're a relatively new player.
Yes, I haven't been around as long as somebody like you or some of the other veterans in the circuit, but I've made friends with a lot of them, and I've already had many, many memories and lots of great times just playing VGC and traveling to these different events.
That's awesome. So I'm sure listeners are wondering, what kind of accomplishments have you had since you've started?
Well, in the 2014 season, I did not accomplish anything because I was just a rookie. And from there, the very next year, at the U.S. National Championships in 2015, I managed to reach the top 8 without cutting any event beforehand. So that was my very first breakout performance. And since then, I won multiple PCs. I finished second at a midseason showdown as well as top 8 as a midseason showdown. And my most recent big finish was top 8 at the Collinsville Regional here in the year 2016.
And that breakout performance at U.S. Nationals last year, that was huge.
It was a huge deal for me. I was in awe and just so shocked from it, and I still am when I reflect on it. It's one of my happiest memories. I just couldn't believe it. It was an amazing weekend. I had so much support from my friends, especially everyone in the Chicago area that you and I both know, and it was such a good time.
Yeah, that's pretty great. I remember watching the stream for that, for day 2 coverage of U.S. Nationals that year, and I was just shocked that you made it to top cut.
Yeah, that was very cool for me. I had got to play against so many big names throughout the 2 days, and in both my last rounds of Swiss, in the 9th round, I managed to defeat the undefeated person who was 8-0 and managed to make them 8-1. And on day 2, when I was playing against the 5-0, sitting at 4-2, I managed to beat them and clinch my position in there, or 4-1, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, that sounds more correct.
Yes, 4-1, and I managed to beat them and knock them down to 5-1 and nail myself at 5-1. So clinching the finish into the top 8 bracket.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, didn't national champion Toller Webb defeat you?
That was who I lost to, so at least I can say I lost to the national champion.
Very nice. Really great accomplishments from you. I'm sure a lot of people are expecting great stuff from you in the future, but I'm just going to quickly go over, my kind of stuff. I started competitive Pokemon in 2005. It was really when I got started. I got invited to some singles tournament out in Seattle, so that was kind of cool. I've been playing since then. Started at the beginning of VGC even before then, playing in Journey Across America in 2006. And I've been hooked on the live competitive scene ever since. Just quick overview of my accomplishments. I'm just going to ramble through these. These are a bunch of old stuff probably no one cares about anymore. I got, top 8 regionals in 2009, 2011, 2014, twice this season in 2016 in the winter and the spring. I've gotten second at regionals twice, Fort Wayne 2012, Madison 2013. I did win a regional in 2013 in Phoenix, won a midseason showdown this season, and top 4 to another midseason showdown. I've also won multiple Premier Challenges just like you, Alex. And then I also have top 8 U.S. Nationals 2011 and 2013 and competed at Worlds twice. So that's enough of me. I'm sure it's a whole bunch of nonsense to a bunch of you listeners out there, but that's pretty much an overview of us. We're going to kind of go over now why we started doing this podcast. Basically, we're covering the Video Game Championship Circuit, and what this is Pokemon's official competitive series that players can compete in throughout the year. So the standard season runs from September through August, and then the next one starts. So think of it like a sports season. It keeps renewing itself every year, and players compete at events throughout the year that culminate in the World Championships that happen every August, and that's this month, coming up in just a few weeks. So both Alex and I have received invitations to the World Championships this season. And Alex, what I want you to kind of explain to people, so for those who are newer out there, what is VGC? How do people qualify for Worlds? And what is kind of the structure of these different size of events throughout the season?
I'd love to talk about that, Steven. One thing that separates VGC from a typical sports season is, if you would even consider there's an off season, it's only a matter of a couple of weeks. From the end of the season in August at the World Championships, you only have a couple more weeks until Premier Challenges start up again, which are the lowest level tournament that you can compete in. Those start in September. And these tournaments, you can have a best finish limit of 6 of these, and those will count towards earning you championship points. Championship points are what you use to determine how well you've been doing over the course of the season. You end up on a leaderboard, and this leaderboard at the end determines who gets paid trips to these different places that U.S. nationals and paid trips to the World Championships. So that's what they're competing for over the course of the whole season. And so a Premier Challenge is the smallest tier event. And then in the fall, and in the winter, and in the spring, we have regional level events. These events are much bigger. There are typically 5 around the U.S. that we have during fall, spring, and winter. And then from there, once December flips over to the new calendar year, we typically get a new rule set. And that rule set will follow the calendar year. So for VGC 16, we've been playing with this format for about 8 months. And from there, we go to a new format at the Winter Regionals, which happen in February. And then in May, we have the Spring Regionals. Following that, in the summer, July, we have U.S. Nationals. And that brings us right back to August with the World Championships.
Pretty great summary of what the VGC season consists of. For our listeners out there, just a reminder, we are from the United States. And what we described of the VGC season is pretty exemplary, pretty defined like this worldwide. So basically, this isn't just restricted to, say, a North American player. You know, everyone can play worldwide, receive an invitation to the World Championships. So that's pretty great summary. You did mention how the actual format starts in January of the following year. So we mentioned earlier how these seasons start in September and then go through August, and you're playing an older format for the first 4 months from September to December, and then January to August is the next portion of that new format where it ends in the World Championships. And then, you know, that system recycles itself again to the next year. That's always a weird thing I didn't like too much, but it is what it is and we'll have to move on.
Yeah, it's a hard concept to follow, playing part of your competitive circuit in an older format and then playing the majority of it in a newer circuit, and then just recycling it to the next year.
Do you like a system like that?
I think I like the system, but I think it would be better if we did play a format from the beginning to the end in maybe like the calendar year. The only part that would make that difficult is not having the World Championships during the summer, at least the summer here in the United States.
I completely understand what you mean, but why not just have the circuit from September to August be one format?
The hardest part with that being one format is the games typically release closer to December and typically in November. So if we wanted to have a format based around the newest game, we would have to play that new game nearly like 10 or so months after it had come out. So unfortunately, we're kind of trapped where we are now, where we play these old formats for part of the season and then we play new formats for the majority of the season, and the cycle's going to be hard to break. Pokemon's going to have to come up with something very innovative to break the cycle, but if they do, I think it would be for the best, because it's a little bit confusing.
Right, and I'm sure there are other arguments for, you know, we don't really need to change much of how the circuit is built like this, with, you know, maybe the first third being an older format and then the second third of a season being the actual format you're playing at the World Championships. But this is, you know, an interesting topic. You know, we could debate this for an entire episode, but we're going to move on, kind of talk about, why do we want to start doing podcasts? And one of the reasons for us starting this show, The Hyper Voice, is we want to make a contribution to growing the game of competitive Pokemon. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. One of those ways is, through YouTube. And, we got some prime VGC examples of YouTubers. Examples like, I'm going to list out the major ones I can think of are like Cybertron, 13 Yoshi 37 from Germany, and Baz Anderson from the UK. I'm sure there's other great ones out there. I'm just listing the major ones that I think have had a grand impact on the VGC scene. So what these YouTube channels do is they have a lot of different types of video content specifically for VGC, but the biggest thing I think they do is they really teach you how to battle and how to process their thoughts at every point in a battle. And they explain, whether they got lucky, whether there were changes in moves that they needed to make, whether their decisions were correct. Just a lot of different things that go into battling. I highly recommend those YouTube channels. And something like we're doing, like a talk show, smalls a really fall niche in the community. So an example of this is there aren't that many talk shows and/or podcasts that cover specifically Pokemon VGC. And to just list some examples of this is we have the Lava Pool that mainly covers the North American scene. They've been running since July 2012, and more recently, there's a great series on YouTube called Goldenrod Live, run by Matt Dorrell, and he has really great coverage of the European scene. And these are the biggest talk show kind of things that I can think of that really cover the VGC scene and do a really good job of it. And I'm sure I'm missing some other ones out there, so sorry if I don't know, but we love to hear you guys, so just let us know about that. Alex, what else do you think?
Well, I think that a major reason that we're doing this, like you said, is to grow the game and to just kind of get VGC out there and try to show other people what it's like to attend a live tournament and play Pokemon with your friends. It really gets people out of the house, and you get to make so many new friends, so many new memories, and visit all these cool places. If you're lucky enough to earn an invite to the World Championship, or if you're good enough, skilled enough to earn that invite, you can get to visit the World Championships in these very fun locations in different cities, and you also get to meet several different people from around the world, because Pokemon Worlds is about competing with everyone from around the world, and you get to meet all kinds of unique people, all kinds of unique personalities, understand what their style is, and compete for that ultimate goal in the end. And I think a lot of people would enjoy having the opportunity to attend these types of events if they had known what they were.
Right. So I think that's a great reason why, we're kind of starting this. So hopefully we have some newer listeners listening to this, and hope maybe this will interest you in starting VGC. So we'll keep moving on. Other reasons why we're kind of doing these podcasts is there's a lot of stories that, I just personally haven't shared with people before. And, in the future, we plan on having guests on this show. So we'll get a lot of people to, share their stories, share their opinions. And specifically, something that I specialize in is VGC history. So I'm hoping we get to do history segments in the future.
I'm very excited to hear about all these different stories that you have, because even after how long I've known you for, there's still so many different things that I can hear from your experiences in playing competitive Pokemon for so long and attending these live events for so long. You've been playing since how long?
Since 2005.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's like over 10 years of these competitive events that you've been playing, and over there you've probably made so many different friendships and so many different memories that you can talk about, so many different stories that you can share with people to understand exactly what they're getting into when they join the VGC community.
It'd be nice if I still weren't a scrub, but I'm working on it, guys. I'm trying to get better. It's hard.
Yeah, we're really looking to get out there and reach out to some of the newer players, as well as just sharing some of our stories with the more veteran players that are looking to hear from another player's perspective. And it's really nice that we have this outlet to share stories with people, because while there are big people on YouTube showing how to battle and sharing their experiences there, this feels a nice role in giving people that are like traveling between work and between school and traveling, and so they can listen to these while they're traveling and kind of pass the time, learn more about VGC, and gain an interest for it.
Right. And, exactly. Some people might not have time to sit around and watch YouTube videos all the time. And, that's fine. You're busy. Other people do, and they can learn that way too. So this is just another avenue for you guys to learn, have fun, enjoy Pokemon. But we're going to move on to what's happening in VGC right now. At the time of recording, this is early August. So US Nationals happened about a month ago now, and we had some pretty interesting things happen there. So the players that managed to advance to Day 2 of the World Championships, and I guess we didn't really explain very well between Day 1 and Day 2, so Alex, do you want to go ahead and do that?
Yeah, sure. So at the end of the circuit, for at least for some of the countries, you can earn an invite straight to the Day 2 of the World Championships. Worlds is run over the course of 3 days. And in previous years, they've had a last chance qualifier for people to attend Worlds and try to make it into the World Championships on that last chance. But this time, and I believe the previous year, they eliminated the last chance qualifier so that instead all the players had to earn an invite through the regular circuit. And this year, players that play in Day 1 and manage to finish with a record of 2 or fewer losses will advance to Day 2. But some players who finished well enough through, for example, the North American circuit, 8 players who finished well enough over the whole course of the circuit will be able to skip that first day of playing and jump straight to the second day. And all those players in the second day will also continue to play until they have a small enough group of 2 or fewer losses, and those people will play in the top cut to eventually reach that championship, which is played on the final day of the World Championships.
And that type of format where there's a Day 1 tournament, a brand new tournament on the second day, and then the top cut, which is really the bracket stage of the tournament, is a similar format that we had at the US Nationals this past month.
It was interesting how this was the first year that they allowed the top cut of US Nationals on Day 2 to consist of the players with 2 or fewer losses instead of a traditional top 8 bracket that they normally do.
And I thought that was an incredible change. It was huge. And, it takes out that opponent's resistance problem that, nobody likes to work with. No one likes dealing with that. So, incredibly positive change for the circuit. And hopefully this is something that trickles down to some of the lower level events and across the world too. I'd like to see that change.
Yeah, it would be nice to see the effect of resistance be mitigated less and less and less, because if you were to look at last year's World Championships, if you look just past the top 8 cut, some of the players that with 2 or fewer losses were Americans, were from Mexico, from all kinds of different countries, and the cut would have been a lot more diverse if we had just taken those 2 or fewer losses players. But instead, resistance was a factor, and it created the cut that we had last year.
And yeah, there's much greater diversity in terms of nationalities of the players just under that top 8 bubble there at the World Championships last year, and it would have been great to see that. But we kind of just went over what the buys mean, is that people can advance directly into the second day of the World Championships. And from the North American circuit, we have the following 8 players with buys. So they do not have to participate in Day 1 because they had a tremendous season to bypass that. So in order from the championship points leaderboard, we have Chase Libert, Aaron Traylor, Grant Weldon, Conan Thompson, Gary Chen, Blake Hopper, Joshua Lorsey, and Bjorn Johnson. So Alex, what do you think about this roster coming from North America?
Well, I say there are a lot of surprises, especially with the way the format had been going and the season had been going for the duration. And there are a lot of names that weren't way up there beforehand. There were a lot of surprises, a lot of people who we expected to make it up there that didn't, a lot of people who were very good in previous seasons that maybe just hadn't played as much this year and then managed to squeeze back in. And I thought it was a very entertaining national to watch. And seeing these Day 2 players, I think that I agree with basically all of them.
Yeah, I do too. Especially considering how well they finished. All these players who received buys finished at a minimum at least in the top 16 of US Nationals. So to further break that down, 3 of the 8 finished in the top 8, so they at least reached the quarterfinals, and 5 of the 8 reached the top cut bracket. This year at US Nationals just happened to be 12 for the first time really having this kind of format. There are 12 of them. 5 of those 8 were in that bracket, trying to reach becoming national champion. What I wanted to ask you about that, all these players did so well at US Nationals. What's the point of all this playing before Nationals? Does our preseason matter?
Yeah, it does seem that the national tournament does reward a lot of championship points, and so you would think that maybe the rest of the season doesn't matter as much, and if I just have a good run at Nationals, I could get that day 2 invite and get my paid trip to the World Championships. But that's not actually the case. We found that if you were to have 0 championship points and take the whole tournament, based on these 8 players that finished up there, you still would not have the day 2 invite. You would not have enough championship points. And so it seems that the rest of the season impacted this greatly, and all these players had to have at least played in a couple of other events and done well at them to have enough championship points to earn them this day 2 invite.
Another thing I think is that all these 8 players, I hope they're excited to play in day 2. They're going to be some of our hopes to bring the World Championship back to the United States. So we'll see what happens.
I'm very excited to see, and I'm definitely rooting for Team USA.
Oh, yes. Well, us being natives of the United States of America, we're obviously a little biased in who we're hoping to see win the World Championships. But let's see. From these 8 specifically, with the day 1 bye already, of these 8, who do you think will get the furthest? Who will make their deepest run into the tournament?
That's actually a very good question. And from looking at these people and looking at their history in previous years of playing, I would have to say that the player that I think is the most consistent might be Aaron Traylor. I'm going to go with saying Aaron Traylor is going to make it the furthest this year. Out of these 8 with the day 2 bye. And the reason I'm picking Aaron is because I've watched him a lot in the 2015 season when I was just starting out for my second year. And I really enjoy watching his play style, and I think that he has what it takes to make it all the way up there.
That's a pretty neat opinion and really cool pick. Aaron did a really good job at Nationals. I was very impressed by his play there. But I'm actually going to go with Blake Hopper for my pick to make the deepest run. He's the only North American player to receive the day 1 bye from the World Championships. This has only happened for the past 2 seasons so far, and he's the only one who's done that. And that's a pretty big accomplishment to achieve, especially in our competitive circuit. Basically, someone like Blake who's, just barely missed out on reaching the top cut these past 2 years. I know how good of a player he is. I know everyone else knows how good of a player he is. And he's been consistent, obviously. Really good player. I think he'll make a pretty strong run at Worlds this year.
Yeah, it's nice that you bring up Blake because he probably would have been one of my next picks. Watching him last year at the World Championships in 2015, he was, I believe, the highest finishing American. And I watched his last round on stream, and he had to win to have a chance to make it into that top 8 cut. And I was watching, hoping and hoping, because it was looking really gloom for all the Americans that I was rooting for. And Blake was one of these Americans that I was rooting for. And he managed to win his final round. And so I thought he had clinched it. He would make it into the top 8. And then when they posted the final standings for the top 8 bracket and he was just barely not in there, I was heartbroken. I was like, that is just so hard to see.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult sight for the US fans out there and any Blake Hopper fans out there, really. But we have a new tournament structure that alleviates this problem, and hopefully we won't see something like that happen again in the future, and it won't this season. So World is going to be exciting, and I can't wait. So both Alex and I have received invitations to the World Championships this year. We both reached the minimum qualification level to qualify, and that was 350 championship points this season. We're both going to be there. We're excited to play in it, and what kind of Pokemon are we expecting?
Jumping right into the Pokemon I see. All right, Steven. Well, it's one of the things that I'm sure all the players attending World Championships are thinking about. What is the rest of the field going to bring? What are they going to be using, and how do I beat it? How do I come on top of all those Pokemon? And pretty much since the beginning of this format, there is a pairing that we've been seeing dominate many, many tournaments, and I still expected to see it do well at the World Championships. And the 2 Pokemon that I'm talking about are using Groudon and Xerneas together as a pair.
No.
Yes, I know. I think that not seeing them make the top 8 would probably shock fans beyond belief, and there's no doubt in my mind going to be at least one pairing of the two in the top cut, whatever size it may be. But in the top cut, there will be most definitely a Groudon Xerneas in pairing.
But why? Why are they so good? Doesn't make sense.
You want me to explain it to you, Steven?
No, guys, I'm just kidding. So, Groudon Xerneas is extremely terrifying to play against, and in the hands of any skilled player is extremely deadly. They are your primary offense on your team, as should be the rest any other restricted Pokemon you're using or playing against. And they have extremely good defensive synergy and offensive synergy, especially on the typical Groudon Xerneas cores we've been seeing. So, they add a Mega Kangaskhan, a Mega Salamence, and then Smeargle. And to round out the typical Big Six team, we used to have Talonflame a lot, and that was the really standard core that started early January. And as the seasons developed and the metagames developed, we've seen replacements for a whole different slew of Pokemon. We saw Aaron Traylor replace the Mega Kangaskhan with Cresselia and the Talonflame with Bronzong. So instead of having 2 Megas, he had 2 different Psychic types to use there. But most people tend to replace Talonflame solely, and there's a lot of variety with what people can do there. So, Alex, what are you expecting from the World Championships in terms of Big Six modifications?
I think that the strongest variant of Big Six is running it with Cresselia, and that's just because Cresselia is at a great speed tier to work with the primals. It can either make use of the Icy Wind, or it can make use of the Trick Room. And then using it in combination with Groudon and Gravity, using Gravity and Precipice Blades is such a deadly combination. Having such a strong, powerful move, and having it be able to hit flying types, having it be able to hit anything without missing is such a huge factor. And Cresselia just helps Groudon so much, and it also helps slow down opposing Xerneas and help your Groudon beat another Xerneas. So I believe Cresselia is the strongest one, but we probably will also see lots of Bronzong as well.
Yes, Bronzong came up huge at a variety of the most recent nationals, so really popular in Japan, really gave a big showing at US nationals too, and I'm expecting a lot out of it personally. We'll see whether a Bronzong or Cresselia variant comes out on top, if they come out on top with the Groudon Xerneas core, or maybe both. We'll see.
So Steven, what's another combination of Pokemon that you might expect to see do well, or just a Pokemon in general that you expect to do well at the World Championships?
In terms of popularity, Primal Kyogre is probably the next Pokemon. Like, if Groudon Xerneas were not to win Worlds as a pair, Kyogre probably would. There are a lot of different pairings it can have, and I guess I kind of misspoke there when I said that, but what I mean is, like, Groudon could be paired with different restricted Pokemon. It could even be Kyogre, so those typical double Primal teams we've been seeing. What's special about the VGC 16 season is we can have 2 restricted Pokemon on our teams. This is pretty rare. We usually don't have this over the course of a regular VGC season. Really only the second time we've had this before. And, I'll still stick with Kyogre would probably be, the other primal Pokemon. The other Pokemon that's going to make a splash at Worlds.
Yes, I definitely do think Kyogre is a Pokemon to watch out for at the World Championships. It's got such a back and forth matchup with Groudon. What's interesting when you look at the Groudon and Kyogre dynamic is with the way their weather works, Groudon actually plays the fight versus Kyogre more defensively, while Kyogre plays it more offensively. Because interestingly enough, Groudon cannot one-shot Kyogre without a critical hit, whereas if the weather is right, Kyogre is going to one-shot Groudon very easily.
And that comes to, just basic good play. Who can dominate the weather war? Who gets control of that? You don't want to be in a situation where you're losing that war. But if you are in a situation where you don't have the right weather you're up in, who's at an advantage there?
That's a very good point. It really depends on the type of the Groudon that the player is running, because if you look at a special-oriented Groudon using Eruption and Earth Power and stuff like that, Kyogre might be at the advantage there, because these special Groudons with Eruption, Earth Power, and some other filler move usually don't run very much bulk, and the Ice Beam that they do back to them is going to take them out in 3 hits, while the Earth Power might fall just shy of that. And it also depends a lot on the partner Pokemon, but if we're talking about it one-on-one, then a physical Groudon is definitely going to beat Kyogre one-on-one if it's at a disadvantage in the weather. Whereas Groudon, if it's at a disadvantage in the weather, it still has a chance of winning because Precipice Blades just does so much damage to Kyogre with its very weak defensive stat. Like Groudon typically has the advantage over Kyogre in the most, and that's why we see most teams having Groudon. But I would say that it's very variable when the weather is not in your favor, which Primal is going to do better.
Right. I still think Primal Groudon's best Pokemon in this format. There's really no question about that. But, other than that, the World Championships are coming up in 2 weeks. We've had this season worldwide 16 national championships across the world, and we did a small breakdown of the winning cores from them. So half of those 16, 8 were Groudon Xerneas cores. 2 of them were Groudon Kyogre double primals. Another 2 were Rayogres, so Rayquaza Kyogre. And then the other 4 teams, the 4 remaining teams, were these combinations of Groudon Yveltal, Groudon Rayquaza, Kyogre Xerneas, and Rayquaza Xerneas. And what's interesting about that is all these national championship winners only had 5 different combinations, or not 5 different combinations, but there are only 5 types of these restricted Pokemon used. So what does that say about the metagame?
I would say that the metagame is a bit restricted, definitely with the pun intended. But we only see legends typically from the XY games or the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire games, including Rayquaza. And those seem to be the 5 legends that are most dominant in this format. And if you want to use the strongest team, you're typically going to pair these guys up with themselves. So pick 2 of these 5, and you're probably going to have a very strong team.
Right, and it can be argued that these are just, maybe objectively a little bit better this format than some of the other restricted Pokemon.
Yeah, it's sad to see that with so many options, being 15 total, that only a third of those are seen in the majority of tournaments, and then the rest of them fill very niche kind of roles.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame that, just Groudon Xerneas just covers so many options. It's such a diverse team. Such a difficult team to beat that you're really kind of limited in team building.
Yeah, it's crazy how even if you try to build a team that is specifically meant to beat Groudon and Xerneas, it's still going to find ways to just sneak that matchup away, or one wrong call and you're still going to lose. And so that's why the strength of Groudon Xerneas is something that just can't be matched in this format.
Speaking of Pokemon, we've kind of been expecting to do well at the World Championships. How about we move on to players? We're playing at an event where you're going to have players from all around the world playing. And for some of the people who have never been to Worlds before competing, this can be really different from the scene you're used to. So typically over the course of the season, you're used to playing in your own region where, people kind of speak similar language and you can communicate with everyone easily. But once you get to the World Championships, it's an entirely different animal. Everyone has earned their way to get there. It is kind of scary when you're there not scary, but it's a different atmosphere when you're hearing a bunch of different languages. And, sometimes you can't even communicate with your opponent. You need a translator to do that. For some of them, if they don't speak whatever language you speak, and that can be difficult at times. Alex, I know this is your first World Championships that you're going to be competing in. Unfortunately, even your top 8 from last year at US Nationals wasn't enough. And, you ended up being that one wild card who didn't get an invitation to Worlds despite the spectacular finish you had. But what are you most excited about playing at Worlds?
Definitely the international scene, like you were just talking about. It's going to be very cool to interact with all these different players that I've heard of that have been doing well overseas, and different players who have been doing well around the US, different players, just interacting with them all and getting to meet them, talk with them, get a different cultural perspective. That's going to be a really neat aspect of it. And something else that you were talking about earlier, about how this is a much different scene than playing against people from your own country. I wanted to expand on that and talk about how it's going to make playing kind of a whole new ballgame. It's going to make it where typically you're used to being able to communicate with your opponent, like you said, and some of these people won't even be able to speak the language that you speak. And what that's going to do is it's going to limit the communication between you and your opponent to just physical interaction or something like seeing your opponent, and that makes it a lot harder for some people to read their opponent. And so certain people like to be able to talk to their opponent to get an idea of, are they a safe player? Are they a player who likes to take a lot of risks? And that's going to totally change this up if you just do not have the ability to chat with your opponent.
Right. I agree with that. It can be difficult in this new kind of atmosphere in terms of competitive Pokemon, but when it comes down to it, it's still just a game. Just play the game, make sure you've practiced coming into Worlds, know your team in and out, and along with that is that we have a bunch of different players from around the world, and this is the largest Worlds ever. Do you remember how many players are invited to both Day 1 and Day 2?
I believe seeing somewhere online that it was near like 845 or something like that.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, this is going to be crazy just with the amount of people. That makes it very unique in comparison to the other worlds, where typically in past years you would see a lot more diverse teams brought to the World Championships, because this is like the pinnacle of the season, and you want to make sure that you have all your secret techs, all the things that you've been saving all season to run at the World Championships, things that you can catch people off guard with. And you can also play matchup roulette. And so if your team's not good against a certain type of Pokemon, well, you're only going to play so many rounds, and so you can just hope to avoid that. Where in this case, you're going to be playing a lot more rounds because there's a lot more players, and playing matchup roulette is a lot riskier. So people are going to build teams that are a lot more safe, a lot more common, like using Pokemon that you're used to seeing, and they're going to try to maybe mix up the movesets and stuff just to catch people off guard, because in a best-of-3 setting and very long day of play, typically 9 rounds, maybe more if we... no, I believe it's only going to be up to 9 rounds. But yeah, after a long day of playing, word's going to get around, and using those surprising Pokemon, the effect's going to wear off if everyone else is talking to each other.
They're bringing out the stops for the World Championships. Everyone wants to win that title. It is perhaps the most prestigious title to win in the VGC circuit. VGC only really started in 2009, if we're officially talking about it. 2008, we had a predecessor of the Video Game Showdown. We'll talk about that another time. That's for history. That's for a history segment. But everyone wants that title to become world champion. And what I want to ask you is, who do you think is going to win? Do you think it's possible to really predict a winner, given the pool of players we have?
Most definitely not. Trying to pick the player that's going to win this is like, I don't know. It's just there's way too many variables trying to figure out how many people are going to. One thing that I was interested in talking about, though, is will the person that takes it all come from day 1, or will they be somebody with that day 2 bye so that they don't have to play as much?
Oh, that is interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. So you're kind of pointing out, is someone with the day 1 bye already, who's already in day 2, are they going to be the ones to get through this tournament and win the title? Or is it going to be someone who grinded through the first day, played through Swiss of day 2, along with the others they advanced with and the people with the buys, and then win?
It really changes things up when you got to consider how many people are going to be playing in that day 1, and how you got to look at, is it better to have played and already essentially warmed up and got your mind thinking about playing VGC in that day 1? Or is it better to just not take the chance, play day 2? Not that you have the choice, but is it better for those day 2 players to, take a day to relax, kind of see what everybody else is doing, and kind of scout out what the rest of the competition is doing, and have time to prepare themselves for what they're going to be doing day 2?
It's going to be a grueling day that first day. No matter who comes out of it, they might have some type of exhaustion for day 2, but do you think they'll be more warmed up in a way?
I think that the day 1 players are, and getting that warm up essentially, and getting their VGC minds thinking and active, I think that's going to be the advantage, and somebody who played in the day 1 is going to be the player that ends up making it the furthest.
Yeah, whatever you guys do, just sleep. Get some sleep. You don't want to be going on 24-hour, maybe 48-hour cycles of being awake that long. But you mentioned we did have a great number of players invited to Worlds. How many people do you think are actually going to come?
Oh, yeah. 845. All 845 are going to show up. No, not a chance. There's no way that everyone is going to show up. So we're definitely not going to have a near 900-person tournament. We expect to probably see less than half of that even show up to the World Championships because when you're traveling from all over the world, flights across the country or flights to another country don't come cheap. Not everyone's going to be able to afford that, and so they're going to choose to just not attend. I know several Americans who I've already talked to that aren't going to attend the World Championships, so whatever number of invites there are out there, it's definitely going to be less. And I also wanted to talk about something else in what you said, talking about just simply sleep. Another thing that's interesting to think about the World Championships is we're operating in California time, and so that helps California players. But what about the rest of the world? The rest of the world that's operating on totally different time zones. They're going to have to travel out and be totally thrown off with their sleep schedule. And how do you think that affects the rest of the scene?
I actually think the time zones don't matter that much. Almost every World Championships, actually, yeah, every World Championship's been held in the United States except for the one in Vancouver, Canada. But that was still in the West Coast time zone. So I don't think the time zones make that much of a difference because we've had players from Europe and Japan win the World Championships. So I actually don't think the time zones matter that much. And in the trading card game, we've had a bunch of different variety of people win from different, around the world, different time zones. I personally don't think it matters.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That it didn't seem to slow down people traveling from other countries in previous years. We've had people win from all over, and no matter where the time zone seems to be, it seems that it doesn't stop those international players from playing their best.
I mean, aside from jet lag, maybe they're playing in the time zone that they kind of want to. Their time back at home might be the usual time they play. So we don't know. Again, the time zone thing, for some people, maybe it does matter. I would recommend if you think it's a concern for you, then, find ways to adjust to that. Maybe, I know not everyone has a lot of money to do this, but if you're concerned with the time zone change, arrive there early, try to adjust to it. But otherwise, I mean, just play Pokemon. Don't worry about what time zone you're going to be in. I don't think it matters. Maybe other people do. The top cut size bracket, it's not going to be just a flat out clean 8 anymore. It could be. That should be exciting.
I think that, like we've been talking earlier, eliminating the effects of resistance is definitely best for the scene. And while Pokemon does have its luck, and that's kind of what makes the game great, is that with a turn-based game and luck introduced, effectively anybody could win. Anybody could win the World Championships if they just click all the right buttons, or just get lucky enough. And that's kind of what makes Pokemon interesting. But I think that eliminating the effects of resistance is best because you can control how you play, and you can control how well you're doing at the end of the day. What you can't control is how well your opponents do. Like, maybe you want to really assure that you win, and so you beat the player that you're playing really badly. And what if that just crushes the morale of that opponent, and they go on to lose the rest of their games? Well, that's hurting yourself, and you just chose to take a win as easy as you possibly could, and in the end, it actually ends up hurting you because that person went on to lose all the rest of their games, whereas somebody who barely beat their opponent, their morale is still high, they go on to win a couple more games, and that makes the difference between you getting into that top 8 bracket and you being bubbled out.
Yeah, I do kind of want to say that maybe it wasn't just morale, maybe they just weren't that good. But it can happen. It's happened before at the World Championships. Resistance can be killers, at varying different levels of tournaments. But another interesting thing about Worlds these past 2 seasons is that players from day 1, you get your battle box locked, and you have to use that team throughout that day. But anyone who advances from the first day into day 2, they're allowed to change their teams. Now, is that something you would recommend? Like, what advice would you give to players about that?
I personally think that switching teams is not the way to go, and that's from talking to the other people about it, saying that people switching teams has never worked well for them, and then also it's just a mess in practice. If you want to do well at the World Championships, you're going to have to practice a lot. You're going to have to get comfortable with your team, and so if you get comfortable with that team, you switching it up on day 2 effectively eliminates your practice. And if you're trying to prepare for that, you're essentially splitting your practice between 2 teams, which is probably not good for practice. It's going to give you have as much training as you want with a team. And I think it's just kind of a waste of time to do that. I think the best bet is to get comfortable with a team and just be ready to beat people who know what you're bringing, be ready to be flexible and play adaptable, and win with the same team that you bring to day one if you are playing on day one.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm personally just building one team for Worlds in general because we're both playing in day one. I don't really have any plans to change. If I manage to advance, I probably wouldn't change anything. I think the only thing people would want to change is maybe you have an unfriendly Kangaskhan using return and you somehow manage to make it through. That would be a change I would make.
Oh, very much so. I've seen a lot of players do
Make your
like that.
Kangaskhan happy overnight, guys.
Love your Kangaskhan's. And so, speaking of you team building and stuff like that, and just all these other people team building, what's like one strange or odd Pokemon that you want to see or you expect to see make that top cut in the second day?
Do you mean in general any Pokemon or just restricted?
Well, since the format is the format is based around restricted, and if we're talking about just any old Pokemon that's like a super shot in the dark, let's limit to those 15 restricted Pokemon.
Actually, why don't we do both?
We could try to do something both like that. All right. So give me your restricted one first.
So if I were to pick an odd restricted one to make day 2, I'm actually going to go with Mewtwo. That would be an odd pick for me to get into top cut. Considering the strength of players we have.
Yeah, I definitely think that Mewtwo would be a weirder one. It's a bit more frail and offensive, and it's just kind of playing fast and loose, where a lot of the other restricteds have some bulk to back them up. But it does have that power. If somebody's ready to make all the right calls, they could definitely get somewhere with it. For me, the restricted that I think I would say would be strange to see, but could possibly make it, is Kyurem White. And the only reason Kyurem White's going to make it is because it's going to be on one of those gravity teams that abuse a lot of sleep and require making like all the right plays. Even though the formula is quite predictable, I think if those teams get the right sleep rolls, we're going to see a Kyurem White team make it to the top cut.
Visually, I do like seeing Kyurem White. I think it looks really cool when it has all those, flames wrapping around his body like that. Especially just in its design. And I like the build those teams usually have. They have gravity, they abuse the sleep moves really well with gravity. And, it's making the most out of that move with Blizzard, Precipice Blades, those usually inaccurate sleep moves. And that could be a really cool pick to see.
And as for a typical Pokemon, just nothing like restricted, what kind of Pokemon would you expect to see make the top cut that's just kind of out there?
I would love to see something with Insomnia get up there. Maybe like Hypno.
Ah.
Although I don't think it's strong enough to. Doesn't Gorgeist get Insomnia?
Yes, Gorgeist. We saw Gorgeist do well at the Australian National Championships.
Oh, cool. Something with the sleep immunity, like really kind of abusing that. That would be kind of cool to see. Just break through all the Smeargle we're going to see. Prepare for Smeargle, guys. Major threat.
I think a strange one that I could see possibly doing well is Ambipom, because Ambipom gets actually a couple of different moves that can be really disruptive. Like, obviously it gets the fake out, and it's very fast. And then if you use it with moves like Quick Guard, it can be a very good partner for Xerneas. And then it also gets moves like Beat Up, if you want to pair it with a Justified Terrakion. It gets Snatch, if you expect the opponent to go for Tailwind, or something like that, or another boosting move. And I think that it can be very disruptive. I haven't looked at the calcs, but it also gets Double Hit. Double Hit might not be enough to get Smeargle KO'd past the Focus Sash. So I think Ambipom is an interesting one that could have some potential. It's definitely an odd one, but it supports Xerneas and is kind of disruptive. So I think Ambipom would be a fun one to see make it to the day 2 cut.
Oh boy, could you imagine that? Seeing Ambipom?
Yeah, I don't know if people would be more surprised by Ambipom or surprised by how they saw Pachirisu, for at least the newer players that didn't know exactly what Pachirisu was going to be doing.
I think either way, Ambipom kind of would be the Pachirisu of this season if we saw it get into the bracket. People would go wild for that.
I would love to see it, because when you see those strange Pokemon make it into the cut, that's when everyone gets on board, everyone's interested, and people are just really engaged.
Right. It really shows where sometimes creativity and innovation can still break through, even at the World Championships. People are, again, going to reiterate this. They're going to be pulling out every minor or major trick in the book they have to try and win this title. It's the most prestigious one we have really in the competitive scene.
Yeah, people will definitely be going all out. This is the highlight of the season. This is what we've all been playing for this whole year long. And if you're not busting out your best team at this point, then it's really just wasted after this. There's a couple of smaller events, but this is what we all play for. We all play to do well at the World Championships, to fight for a chance at that title. And if you're not fighting your hardest, then I'm not sure why.
I mean, unless for some reason you feel like you don't have any chance to win it all, which, you shouldn't think that way. Come in with confidence. Come in and play. Come in and do your best. Regardless of what happens, just have fun. Guys, both Alex and I are going to be at Worlds, so you guys can come and talk to us. We'll be happy to talk to you guys about anything, really. We're pretty friendly guys. I guess moving on, one of my favorite parts at the end of the World Championships is the closing ceremony. They do they award all those trophies to all the players who finished, I want to say top 4 or better. So that's always pretty cool. But my favorite part has got to be when they reveal the next location for the World Championships.
So you just show up to the World Championships and you're already thinking about next year?
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking about it right now. I've been thinking about it for a while. Where's World's going to be next year?
We haven't even gone to San Francisco yet.
Well, I don't think we're going to have another episode up before then, so where do we think Worlds is going to be next year in 2017?
Well, I've thought about it myself some too, and it's one that I think a lot of people have been talking about, and that's kind of my basis for thinking it. And a lot of people are thinking that we might go back to Hawaii. We've been to Hawaii in previous years, I believe 3 times in the past, in 2007, 2010, and 2012.
You are not wrong.
And so I think that we might go back there just because Hawaii seems to have some kind of importance or correlation with the new games coming out, Pokemon Sun and Moon, which we're not going to get too much into Pokemon Sun and Moon today. That's definitely something that we'll be talking about in the future. But right now we want to talk about the World Championships. And so I think it's going to be in Hawaii because of Alola and the new games. And that would really market it really well.
You know what? I think that would be great to have the World Championships in Hawaii again. I was there in the past for one of them. It was pretty fun. It's a great location. But it does make sense in terms of Sun and Moon. The Alola region's really all based off on Hawaii. It makes sense, but it seems too perfect. And I kind of want to go over what do we really look for in a World Championship site. And things I've noticed throughout the years is that every site that we've been to has been located near a large body of water, so usually an ocean, and it absolutely has to have a large international airport. You don't want to put the World Championships where you're getting players from around the world, maybe having to take domestic flights to a smaller city that doesn't have an airport like that. So those are 2 criteria I always look for. When you check these, all the cities we've been to in the past have had this, relatively. Orlando was the first one in 2004 where they just had the trading card game. And just going down the list through the years, it was Orlando in 2004, San Diego 2005, Anaheim 2006, Hawaii 2007, Orlando 2008, San Diego again in 2009, Hawaii in 2010, Hawaii in 2012. I missed San Diego in 2011. I skipped over that one. We went to Vancouver in 2013, Washington, D.C. in 2014. Last year was in Boston, and San Francisco is in just a few weeks. So I think all of those cities kind of fit that criteria really well. You might question Orlando a bit and say, that's pretty much in the center of Florida. But, it's close enough to the beach. I think they've got a big lake nearby too. But I'm not talking about the lake. I really mean the ocean's close enough that it's a tropical vacation type city. Kind of the themes they were going for in the early World Championships. But, the sites have been changing a lot recently. It boils down to those 2 criteria.
Steven, you've been bouncing around this for a long time, and I think we all want to know, what is your pick for next year's World Championships? Where do you think it's going to be?
Oh, okay. Finally. You're going to make me drag my answer out. Okay. So, personally, Hawaii would be great. I think it's too perfect to have that. That'd be a perfect world. I don't think we're going to have that. So I'm just kind of gonna go out there, and it's kind of a safe pick, and it's really close to San Francisco already. But I'm just gonna go with LA for next year.
I'm not too surprised by that one. Like you said, like it's a safer pick, and I think it's definitely reasonable.
Hawaii's just too perfect. Do you really think that's gonna happen?
Maybe I'm just secretly hoping, but then again, not hoping because of the price of the flight.
That's true. I think we're all hoping for Hawaii. That would be amazing. The perfect, backdrop for the new Sun and Moon games coming out. But guys, that's it for us. We've had a lot of fun doing this. We hope you guys keep tuning in, keep listening to us. You guys can ask us questions on the YouTube version of this. Leave us comments, leave us questions. We'll be happy to answer you guys. We will have 2 versions of this on YouTube and on some podcasting site that is yet to be determined. So whatever that is, by the time you're listening, you already know because you're listening to it. But we're going to wrap up here. You guys can follow both of us on Twitter. Alex, what's your Twitter handle? Tell the people to follow you.
My Twitter is at Lexicon VGC, and I will be tweeting out the podcast when they're released so that it gets the word out and you know when they're coming out. And so I'm going to definitely be tweeting about the podcast and stuff related to it. So if you do follow me, you will get important updates. I don't tweet very often, but when I do, it's usually about something interesting or something important.
Love the advertising. Would be excellent. My Twitter handle is at @SuperMorioka. So guys, go follow us. We'll tweet out when the Hyper Voice comes out. We do plan on having guests in the future. We're just starting out on this. We're really new to this talk show kind of thing. So there's probably been some mistakes here and there in this show, but we're going to work on improving. Let us know, guys, any improvements we can make, what kind of other things you want to see. Leave us your questions, and that's a wrap. We'll see you guys next time on the Hyper Voice.
See you around.